Hello, this is Jack Jackson. Today we're going to look at the TI-nspire calculator, and the version I have on this emulator is the newest version as of the time I'm doing this video, the TI-nspire CX. So this has color to it, but whether you have the color version or not, most of the things, except obviously for the color, work the same, and the things that I'm going to go over today work the same whether you have the computer algebra system or not. This is what the calculator looks like. I also have in this software, which, by the way, when you buy a new one of these calculators, you can and probably should get the version that comes with a student version of the software that's pretty much like what I'm showing you here for the teacher version. This allows you to use this on your computer, basically have a real powerful calculator on your computer as well. So here's the handheld. Here's the handheld, but the screen right here is sort of copied over here to the right, bigger, and so that I can see the buttons a little bit bigger, I'm actually going to delete the screen on the thing on the left, and I can do that right here by showing just a larger version of the keypad. So basically the top part of this calculator has been cut off, moved over here, and made bigger. But basically this is exactly what the calculator would look like. This is what the calculator looks like when you pull it up. Now let's start a new document, number 1. So I'm going to press 1 there. And do I want to save this unsaved document? I don't particularly at this point. And I can add different things to it. I'm going to go ahead and add a calculator. And I'm going to hit the menu button here. And I'm going to add a graph as well. Now I'm going to move down here. That's adding a calculator. There's adding graphs. We can also add some dynamic geometry, spreadsheet, statistical graphing, notes. You can have typed in notes, and this is for hooking up to some external sensors. So the main ones we're going to need are the first two here, graphs and the calculator. So I'm going to add a graphing screen to it. Now I can add multiple graphing screens and keep those going as well, but let's just do this here. So notice this, the default is for this to use function notation, f1 of x, f2 of x, instead of y1 and y2 like the TI-84 uses. So let's take a simple example like 3x. Notice I use the x button down here at the bottom of the calculator, and I can then hit enter, and it will graph it, and of course notice how nicely that graphs a nice looking graph that's in color. Now I can do, let's see, a couple things I can do here first. First of all, I can go Shift and T, I believe. No, maybe that's not it. Take that back. Let's take a look here. Let's go to the menu, and we can go down to View. Oops. Let's go back up. View. And let's look at a couple things we can do. We can turn a grid on or off, and we have the option of a dot grid. So this looks kind of like the grid that you can get on a TI-84, but we also have a possibility of a different graph, a different grid. We can actually have a lined grid. So we can have a graph that looks like this with the lined grid on there. And I think I'm going to leave the line grid on, but you could turn that off if you don't like it. Okay, let's take a look at some other things we can do. Under Actions, we can go to Attributes. Attributes, if we click on a particular graph, we have some things that we can change. So we can change the thickness of the graph from very thin to medium to thick. Let's go back to medium. And so you can change the thickness of the graphs. This is continuous. I can also make it just be dots, dashes. So I can make it dashes, dotted, or connected up. I'm going to leave it connected up. We can change the label style. F of x equals 3x is the first one. Y equals f1 of x. Y equals 3x. Or I can just say f1 of x. So those are sort of my options. I'm going to go back to the default. And we can make make it have just a specific number of points, or we can make it continuous. Go back here. That's the label style. Where's my... Here we go. And then we can switch it back. So I'm going to use it there. So there's some basic things about the graphing. Okay, here's the menu button. Let's see what else we can do. We can do... Okay, to hide and show the entry line, you have a shortcut of Control and G. Hit the Control first and then hit G. So, escape to get out of there. So I can do Control and then hit G, and this graphing line shows up. You can also hit... sometimes there's an icon in the bottom that we can see here. So let's graph another one. Control G. Graph another function, x squared. And now we have that. We have different types of graphs we can do: functions, equations, parametric, polar, and so forth. So the normal way of doing it is functions. So we'll just leave it at that for the moment. This does allow us to do some three-dimensional graphing as well. We can turn the axes on and off. And notice that it does, one thing that's nice about this is it does show us basically what the grid spacing is by giving us a number here and here. It also tells us what the max and min numbers are on the grids there. So this gives us a much better idea of what the grid spacing is on the graph. If you click on the graph here, you can, let's see, you can do control click and control and then click, and we can choose a graph. And notice if I get the little hand, I can adjust the scale here on the graph by just dragging that around. Okay, so that's a little different than the other calculators. I can also go to the window here, and mostly I have the same window options that I would have on a TI-84. So for example, I can I chose zoom box, so I can box in a particular area like that and do that. I can go to zoom and go to window settings and actually type in what I want here. Let's say from -10 to 10, and I can do that. Has an automatic setting for changing the x's, and the y, suppose I can let's say I go from -5 to 12 on that. Leave those on automatic, go down to OK and hit enter, and it will redraw it on that particular window. So that gives you an idea of how you manipulate that. So that works just like the graphing does on the graphing possibilities on an 84. And just like the TI-84, you have zoom in, zoom out, zoom box, zoom standard, and so forth. So you might you can experiment with these. For example, zoom standard. Did I do zoom standard? Let me try that again. Zoom Yeah, there's a zoom standard. It's a negative 10 to 10, and the standard on this one looks like it uses a square scale. So for the standard window, a little bit different than zoom standard on the other one. This is a first quadrant zoom. It's a little bit more than the first quadrant, but mostly the first quadrant there. I'm hitting menu every time to get this menu to come up. Zoom, zoom fit is going to leave the window setting alone for the X, but it's going to adjust the Y so that the biggest Y that actually is there in that with those X's of any of the graphs that are graphed, that will be the top Y, and then so forth for the minimum. And it may go to list a little bit beyond that actually. So let me just go back to the standard here, and let's change this a little bit. Let's leave that alone. Let's go from negative 5 back to 12 again. Oops. Alright, well there's a decent looking graph. Not quite a square scale, as you can see here on the grids. The grid lines are not squares. Okay, what are some other things that we can do? We can do trace, and we can hit trace by just clicking on any point that we want there, and it will plot those points on there. Notice if I just move around this, it's going to give me the coordinates down at the bottom. Here it's going to give me coordinates here on this one. And I just kind of move my cursor around with my arrow keys. But if I click a point, it'll actually give me that point. Okay. I can trace all, and here, as I move this over, okay, notice I can also move the entire graph around, changing the window. But as I trace all, I can move this with my right or left arrows, and notice that it basically draws a vertical line, and it shows me the point on both curves with the same X value. If I go to, I can go to trace step, and it does it automatically, but you can force it to go up by a certain amount. Let's see if we force it to go up by entering a value. Let's say we force it to go up by ones. Now, as I move this across, notice it's going up by ones on X's as we go. It's going over basically every grid line the way we've got it here. Okay, let's go down here and do a few other things. Analyze graph. We can compute zeros, minimums, maxima, intersections. For example, let's find an intersection here, number 4, and let's find where these cross. So we ask us first for a lower bound, use our left or right arrows to get across to the lower side and the upper side, and it found that point, which was 3, 9. Okay, let me go back to Control G, I think it was, shows this. Sometimes you'll see a little circle icon over here which can expand and contract this line too. I'm going to go here and I can turn those off, collapse that entry line, and this point, notice as I'm moving it around, it's actually still staying to that curve. I should be able to hit the delete button and delete it, I hope. Let's see here. so I can delete some of these points if I want to. I should be able to go back here. Let's see if I can do this, and instead of just toggling this on and off, I should be able to go here. I can change the characteristics of the graph, but I should be able to just delete this whole thing too. Let me see here. Escape. And let's see if that deleted it or not. Yeah. So I can do here and just use the delete button here, or probably control and clear it. Hit enter to clear that out. So now I don't have anything here. Let's put a new graph in there now. Control G will bring up my list. Let's do, how about a cubic? X cubed minus 2x squared plus x minus 1. Enter. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let me try that again. I didn't mean for all that to be up in the exponent. X to the power 3, and then right arrow will get us down. Okay, now this may not be the same one I just did, but plus 2x, let's say, minus 2x squared plus 3x minus 1. Okay, so we have a graph, and that's not what I want. Let me modify that. Let's see if I make this minus 5x squared. Okay, not bad. And let me change the, let's see, what if I just see if I can grab this. Control here. Okay, let me do it by the window, menu, and window. And let's see what I want to do. Let's say negative 5 to window, settings, negative 5, tab 5, okay, and let's say okay on that for just a minute, and then let's zoom fit. So we'll do menu, zoom, fit. Not bad. We'll just, let me go with that and change it just a little bit now. So let's don't go so far down. Negative 50 to 50. Okay, so there's a graph. Okay, suppose we want to calculate this, some things on this graph, like where it crosses the x-axis, the minimum, and so forth. So I can go to menu and go to analyze graph, and I can calculate a 0. I can give it a lower bound and an upper bound, and it tells me that's about 4.37. I can calculate a maximum. Analyze graph. There's a maximum somewhere between here, and there it is. I can get that text and move it up there like this. I can go to the menu and analyze graph, calculate a minimum, and it's somewhere between here, and there it is at 3, negative 10. This one even does something, I think. Let's see here. If you have the cast version, you can calculate the inflection point, but not with the non-cast version. Calculate an intersection there as well if you have two graphs. So if I want to find an output, I'll find an input given an output. So suppose I want to see which x's give me a y of -2. The way to do that is pull up the Control G and say y equals -2 and graph that. -2, enter. And so we're finding where those graphs cross each other. I might, if I'm only interested in one of the points here, I could zoom in a little bit closer, but I've got all three on the screen now. So now I can go to Menu, I can do Analyze Graph, Intersection, and I can find, say, the intersection between here and here, and it found it for me, at least approximately. There it is. And I could do it again, Menu, Intersection, somewhere between here and here there's one. There it is. And then there's one more between here and here. And there's the intersection point there. Notice how I can move these labels and things around. Okay? So we have lots of things that we can do with this. A lot of the same things that we can do on the other calculators, but maybe a little bit more here. Let's look at some tables. So Control T will split screen the table for us. Okay, and Control T will toggle that back off. So let's do it that way. Control T. Escape. Control T. We'll turn the table on and off. And there's our table. Okay. We can scroll around the table. We can also change some settings on the table by hitting Menu. We can resize some things on the table there. We can delete a column. We can choose different things. Edit table settings, for example. So this is an automatic setup. We can set it independent on ask. And now we can enter in the x's we want. And it will give us the y's. Or, that's if you set it on ask. Or we can go to Menu, go to Table, and edit table settings. Put it on automatic. Just leave the dependent on automatic all the time. And for example, we can tell it to start at -3 and go up by 1s. And that's exactly what we have here, -3 going up by 1s. And we can scroll down the table here, or we can scroll up the table, which is actually to the lower x's. And we can just use the scroll bar to do that. Again, we can go to the menu to remove the table, but we can also have a shortcut. Control T turns the table on and off. Control G turns the list of the functions on and off, where you can type in a new function. Lots and lots and lots of things you can do. We also have something kind of interesting. You can actually grab a graph, and in this case we can rotate it. We can also take a graph and slide it around a little bit. Now what that's doing is that's also changing the formula for the graph. But be a little bit careful when you do that. If you accidentally grab a graph, you're going to be changing and moving around. You may be changing the formula. So there's let's see. We did some zooming there. Let's see what else we've got. set conditions for a graph, if we click on that, we can do a fill color. We can change the color of it. We can put some more advanced conditions. I don't want to get into that right now, but for example, we can choose a line color, and if we click here, you can see the colors that are available. And let's say we want to change it to magenta. We need to type a 6 in here, and now we've changed the color of it. So you can change the color of a line that way if you have the color version of the calculator. Okay, that's a quick introduction to the graphing and the tables and some of the graph features on the TI-nspire calculator. I know we went through that very quickly, but you could watch this a couple of times. If you watch the TI-84 calculator, I went through some of these things a lot slower with that video, and you'll notice the basic concepts are the same on this calculator, but it has a little bit more in the terms of options, a little bit different the way you access everything. Okay, hopefully that'll give you enough to get you started with graphing if you have this calculator.